The desert storm came fast, swallowing the sky with rolling thunder and wind that howled like a wounded spirit. Evelyn Carter gripped the reins of her mare, squinting through sheets of rain that blurred the New Mexico horizon. She'd left town at noon to fetch school supplies from the outpost 2 miles east, never expecting the weather to turn wild. Now her wagon wheel had splintered on a rut, stranding her miles from shelter. With her skirt soaked and fingers numb, she spotted an old trading post half hidden among mesquite trees. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a room long abandoned, dusty counters, broken barrels, and a hearth still stacked with forgotten wood. She hurried inside, her heart pounding as thunder cracked overhead. Striking a match, she lit the fireplace, coaxing weak flames to life. Evelyn wrapped her shawl tight and tried to steady her shaking hands. She was a widow, 27 years old, used to fending for herself since her husband died of fever 2 winters ago. The frontier had taught her one rule: never depend on anyone. But as the wind shrieked outside, she found herself wishing, just for one night, she wasn't alone. That wish ended abruptly with a sound she'd never forget, the slow, dragging crunch of boots in the mud outside. She froze. The door pushed open and a figure stumbled in, tall, broad-shouldered, bleeding from a gash in his arm. His dark eyes, fierce and sharp as flint, locked on hers. His long black hair clung wet to his neck, his skin bronzed by sun and battle. He was Apache. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at one another, the white woman and the wounded warrior, both caught in the storm. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "Stay back," she warned, her voice trembling as she clutched the iron poker from the hearth. But the man didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he pressed his hand to his wound and said, voice rough with pain, "Please, help me." Evelyn hesitated. He was hurt badly. Blood seeped through his shirt, staining it dark. Her fear warred with her compassion, but before she could move, he swayed on his feet and caught himself against the counter. She rushed forward instinctively, catching his shoulder. Sit down before you fall," she said. His breathing was ragged. "They're coming," he murmured. "Soldiers. Hunting me. I did nothing wrong." Before she could ask more, he turned his head sharply toward the door. The sound of hooves echoed in the distance, shouting voices carried on the wind. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes blazed with desperate intensity. "Please," he whispered. "Can you pretend to be my wife tonight?" Evelyn froze. "What?" "They will not harm a married man's home," he said quickly. "If they think you're mine, they will leave us alone." She stared at him, heart hammering. It was madness. She didn't even know his name. But the fear in his voice wasn't the kind that lies are built from. It was the kind that comes from being hunted. Outside, the hooves grew louder. She looked toward the door, then back at the man. He was wounded, cornered, and asking for mercy in the only way he knew how. Evelyn's conscience spoke louder than her fear. "All right," she whispered, barely hearing her own voice. "I'll do it." He blinked as if he hadn't expected her to agree. "You'll need to call me by name," he said hoarsely. "K-10," she swallowed. "Evelyn," he nodded once. "Then Evelyn, stand close to me." The door burst open. Rain and soldiers spilled in together, 3 men in soaked blue uniforms, rifles ready. "You there?" one barked. "We're looking for an Apache fugitive." "You seen anyone?" Evelyn stepped forward before Caton could speak. "You mean my husband?" she said coolly, her chin lifting in defiance. The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertain. Behind her, Caton rested his hand lightly on her waist, the gesture so natural it made her heart twist. "My wife speaks truth," he said in accented English. "I was with her all night." The soldiers laughed, one muttering something crude under his breath. But when Evelyn's eyes flashed fire, they backed off. "Didn't mean no offense, ma'am," their leader said. "We'll move along." When they finally left, silence settled over the post, heavy and strange. Evelyn exhaled shakily and turned to Caton. "What have I just done?" she whispered. He met her gaze, a faint smile ghosting his lips despite the pain. "Saved my life," he said quietly. And though neither of them could admit it yet, that single lie, the one whispered in a storm, had already begun to change everything. The rain hadn't stopped. If anything, it came harder, hammering the old trading post roof like the heartbeat of the storm itself. Evelyn stood frozen, her breath shallow as Caton slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his wound. The faint light from the fireplace flickered across his face, revealing high cheekbones, a scar near his jaw, and eyes that carried too much history for a man so young. Outside, hooves thudded closer. The soldiers weren't gone after all. Evelyn's pulse pounded as she peeked through a crack in the door. Lantern light moved among the trees, 3 shadows circling back. "They're coming," she whispered. Caton's jaw tightened. "If they see me here, they will kill us both." Her stomach twisted. "What are we supposed to do?" He met her gaze steadily. "We keep lying." Before she could question that, the door swung open and a gust of cold wind blew through the room. 3 cavalrymen strode inside, their coats dripping, boots leaving muddy tracks across the warped wooden floor. The lead soldier, a broad man with a heavy mustache, tipped his hat slightly. "Evening, ma'am," he said, eyes scanning the room. "Apologies for barging in. We're chasing an Apache fugitive. Dangerous one. Might have come this way." Evelyn forced herself to smile, though her lips trembled. "You must be mistaken, sir. There's no one here but my husband and me." The soldier's brows lifted. "Your husband?" "Yes," she said quickly. Then, before her courage could falter, she reached back and brushed Caton's shoulder gently, an act that startled her as much as it did him. "He's been hurt. Fell from his horse when the storm started." The soldier's gaze lingered on Caton. Even in the dim light, there was no mistaking his Apache features, the bronze skin, the dark braids. Evelyn felt the lie beginning to crumble before it even began. Caton spoke then, his English calm but thickly accented. "I worked at the mines near Silver Creek, married her last spring. My papers burned when the storehouse caught fire." The soldier narrowed his eyes. "Silver Creek, huh? Don't recall any Apache miners down there." Evelyn stepped forward, blocking his view. "You wouldn't recall every miner, would you, Captain?" she said, her voice sharp as a whip. Something in her tone, something fiercely protective, made the soldier hesitate. He glanced around the room, then back at her. "We just want to be sure you're safe, ma'am. These savages will say anything to fool a woman." At that, Evelyn's eyes flared. "And white men never lie, I suppose," she snapped. "You've seen my husband's injury. He's no danger to anyone." For a long moment, the soldier just stared at her, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Finally, he exhaled. "Didn't mean no offense. But if you see anyone suspicious, you send word to Fort Stanton." Evelyn nodded stiffly. "Of course." The men turned to leave, but one lingered in the doorway, smirking. "Pretty wife you got there, mister," he said to Caton. "Guess even the savages know how to pick 'em." Caton's eyes went cold as steel. "You speak too much," he said softly. The soldier laughed uneasily and stepped out into the rain. A moment later, the sound of hooves faded into the distance. When the silence returned, Evelyn felt her knees weaken. She turned toward Caton. "I can't believe they bought that." He managed a faint smile. "You lie well for someone afraid of lying." She sank onto the stool across from him, her hands trembling. "You could have been killed. And I'd be—" She stopped herself, realizing what she'd almost said. "And I'd be alone again." Caton studied her for a moment, then reached into his shirt and pulled out a small pouch made of tanned hide. From it, he drew a silver locket, battered, old, and clearly precious. He held it toward her. "This was my mother's," he said. "She told me once sometimes lies can save lives if they're told with the right heart." Evelyn looked at the locket, her throat tightening. "And what happens when the lie grows too big to hold?" Caton's eyes softened, their fierce edge dimming for the first time. "Then it stops being a lie." She didn't know how to answer that. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney, and for the first time since the storm began, Evelyn realized how close they were sitting. Close enough to hear the faint rhythm of his breath. The world outside had grown still, but inside that small trading post, something had begun to shift. The lie that saved their lives was beginning to take root, quietly, dangerously between their hearts. The storm raged long after the soldiers' hoofbeats faded into the distance. Rain beat on the roof in steady waves, dripping through old cracks in the boards, and the fire in the hearth hissed with every drop that found its way down the chimney. Evelyn sat near the fire, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, watching the Apache, Caton, as he cleaned his wound with calm, deliberate movements. The cut across his ribs was deep, but he'd refused her help until he began to sway from blood loss. Now she knelt beside him, her trembling hands pressing a strip of torn linen to the wound. He didn't flinch. His dark eyes stayed fixed on her face, studying her as though he couldn't quite understand her. You could have let them take me, he said finally, his voice low and rough. Would have saved you trouble. Evelyn tied the bandage tight. And watched them hang a man without a fair trial? I'm a schoolteacher, Mr. Caton. I may be alone in this world, but I still know right from wrong. A flicker of amusement crossed his face, rare, fleeting. You say my name like it's strange on your tongue. Well, she murmured, glancing at him, it is. That made him chuckle, a soft sound that seemed foreign to him. Then you should learn to say it better. Caton means hawk in my people's tongue. Hawk, she repeated. It suits you. The compliment slipped out before she could stop it. He tilted his head, curious, as though he hadn't heard words like that in a long time. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the fire crackled, warm against the chill that crept through the trading post's walls. Evelyn forced herself to look away, pretending to check the bandage again. His skin was warm under her fingertips, strong, alive. She pulled her hand back quickly, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. She busied herself stacking wood, trying to steady her thoughts. You said you didn't do anything wrong, she said quietly. Then why are they after you? Caton's eyes darkened. He stared into the fire before answering. Because I helped the wrong man. A rancher named Sutter. He wanted peace with my people, said he'd trade fairly. I believed him. Then one day soldiers came, burned our camp, killed women and children. They said I led them there. Evelyn's breath caught. But you didn't? No, his jaw tightened. Sutter betrayed me to save his own skin. When I went to confront him, he was already dead. The soldiers found me there. They think I killed him. Evelyn swallowed, her heart aching at the quiet pain behind his words. So you ran. I ran to stay alive. To find the truth. She nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted to. Grief and injustice had a way of shaping people the same way, whether Apache or white. Outside, the storm began to ease, leaving only the wind's low hum. Evelyn leaned back against the wall, exhaustion creeping over her. You can rest here tonight, she said softly. In the morning, I'll figure something out. Caton glanced at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. You'd let me stay? Seems I already told a lie big enough for both of us, she said with a faint, tired smile. Might as well see it through. He nodded once. You're braver than most. I'm just tired of being afraid. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, Fear keeps people alive, but courage makes life worth keeping. The word settled over her like a blanket, unexpectedly gentle. As he lay down near the fire, Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter and turned away, though she could still feel the weight of his presence. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. The trading post was small, and the distance between them smaller still. She could hear his steady breathing, could sense the quiet strength of him even in sleep. For the first time since her husband's death, Evelyn didn't feel entirely alone, and though she would never have admitted it aloud, she knew something had begun between them that no storm, nor any lie could easily wash away. The morning broke gray and cold, the kind of dawn that smelled of wet earth and old promises. The storm had passed, leaving behind mist that coiled low over the desert floor. Inside the trading post, the dying fire painted soft light across the walls and the two figures who had survived the night side by side. Evelyn stirred first. Her back ached from sleeping upright in the corner, but her thoughts were heavier still. When her eyes found Caton, he was already awake, sitting cross-legged near the fire, sharpening a small knife against a stone. The early light caught his profile, strong, calm, almost carved from the same earth he came from. He looked up when she moved. You didn't sleep much, he said quietly. Neither did you, she replied. I'm used to it. Evelyn rubbed her eyes, then rose and crossed to the broken counter where her saddlebag sat. I have bread, she said, pulling out what was left of a loaf. She hesitated before offering it. It's not much. Caton accepted it without a word and tore it in half, handing her the larger piece. For the wife who saved her husband, he said, and the faintest trace of humor softened his tone. She gave him a look that was half stern, half shy. You can stop calling me that now. He studied her for a long moment before replying. You think the soldiers won't return? Evelyn froze mid-bite. You think they might? They don't like being fooled. He sheathed his knife, his movement steady. If they ask questions in town, they'll find you. They'll want to know why a woman pretended to be married to a hunted Apache. Her stomach tightened. He was right. Lies like this had a way of growing long shadows. "I'll go with you," she said suddenly, the words surprising even her. His brow lifted. "Go with me? I mean into town," she corrected quickly, though she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. "You can hide under the wagon tarp. We'll say I was traveling with my husband all along. If the soldiers return, they'll believe we were just passing through." He didn't answer right away. His eyes searched her face as though weighing something deeper than her words. Finally, he nodded. "You'd risk that for me?" Evelyn looked down at her hands. "I already did." Catan's gaze softened. "You surprise me, Evelyn Carter." "Everyone in town already thinks I'm strange," she said with a weary smile. "A widow who teaches Indian children and fixes her own fences. One more scandal won't kill me." He tilted his head. "You don't belong to them." Her heart gave a strange twist. "No," she whispered. "I suppose I don't belong anywhere anymore." For a moment, silence filled the room again, the kind that didn't need words. Catan finally rose, testing his side where she had bound him the night before. His strength seemed to be returning, though his movements were still careful. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me, for the lie." Evelyn looked at him, really looked this time. "That wasn't just a lie," she said. "It was a choice." He met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them, a flicker of connection that both recognized but neither dared name. They spent the morning readying the wagon. Catan gathered what little wood was left dry enough for a fire and covered the tracks outside, while Evelyn harnessed the mare. When the sun broke fully through the clouds, they climbed aboard. Catan disappeared beneath the canvas tarp, hidden from sight. Evelyn took the reins, her heart thudding with every bump of the wheels. Each mile toward town felt like crossing a river with no bridge. One wrong move, and everything could drown. By noon, the small town of Las Piedras appeared ahead, dust rising from the road where soldiers still lingered near the saloon. Evelyn forced herself to breathe evenly as she guided the wagon past them, smiling politely when one of the men tipped his hat. She felt Catan's hand brush lightly against the boards beneath her seat. A silent reassurance, a promise that he was there. When they finally reached her small house at the edge of town, Evelyn climbed down, glancing back at the tarp. "Stay hidden until I say so," she whispered. "We'll need to make them believe the lie." Again, Catan's voice came soft from the shadows. "And if we keep lying long enough?" Evelyn hesitated. The answer trembled on her tongue. "Then maybe," she said, "it'll start to feel like the truth." He didn't reply, but as she walked toward her porch, the faintest smile curved his lips in the darkness. The sun hung high over Las Piedras, burning off the last of the storm clouds. Evelyn's small house stood near the edge of town, a whitewashed cabin with a porch she'd built herself, lined with clay pots of dying flowers. It was humble, but it was hers. Until today, it had always been quiet. Now, as the wagon rolled into her yard and the wheels crunched over gravel, she felt every curious eye turn her way. People stopped in front of the mercantile, pausing mid-conversation. A child pointed. A woman whispered behind her hand. Evelyn Carter, the respectable schoolteacher widow, had returned from the storm with a man. Catan stayed hidden beneath the wagon tarp as she'd told him to, but the air was thick with rumor already. She could feel the weight of it pressing on her back as she unloaded the wagon. "Mrs. Carter," called a voice. It was Mabel Griggs, the town gossip and self-appointed guardian of propriety. Her wide skirt swished as she hurried across the road, clutching her parasol like a weapon. "You gave us quite the scare. We thought you were caught in that dreadful storm." "I was," Evelyn replied evenly, "but I made it through, thank the Lord." Mabel's eyes darted to the wagon. "You traveled alone?" Evelyn hesitated. She could almost feel Catan's stillness beneath the tarp. Then she forced a small, practiced smile. "No, my husband was with me." Mabel blinked. Your what?" "My husband," Evelyn repeated, her tone calm but final. "Catan." For a moment, Mabel looked as if she might faint right there on the street. "Well, I didn't realize you'd remarried," she stammered. "When did this happen?" "Last spring," Evelyn lied smoothly. "We wanted a quiet life." Behind her, Catan stirred slightly, perhaps hearing the tremor in her voice. Mabel gave a brittle smile. A quiet life indeed, though folks might wonder why he wasn't introduced sooner. Evelyn's patience thinned. Because it's nobody's concern but mine. Mabel pursed her lips, murmured something about the Lord's mysterious ways, and bustled off. But as Evelyn turned back toward her porch, she saw curtains fluttering across the street, more eyes watching. More whispers starting. That night, when the sky darkened and the town finally quieted, Katan slipped from under the tarp and followed her inside. He looked around the small home, books stacked neatly on a table, a quilt draped over the rocking chair, the faint scent of lavender still lingering in the air. "This is where you live?" he asked softly. "It's not much," she said, lighting a lamp, "but it's mine." He touched the edge of the quilt, his fingers brushing the stitched patterns. "You made this?" She nodded. "It helps me think," he smiled faintly. "Then you think too much." Evelyn gave a short laugh, surprised by her own ease. "You can stay in the shed out back. It's dry and no one will bother you there. Just stay out of sight." Katan tilted his head, studying her. "You're not afraid they'll find out?" "I'm already the talk of the town," she said. "What's one more secret?" He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the lamplight. "You risk too much for me." She met his gaze steadily. "You needed saving." "That's reason enough." Katan's expression softened, though something fierce still burned behind his eyes. "In my people's way," he said quietly, "a woman who protects a man becomes part of his spirit. It's not easily undone," her breath caught. "You mean, like marriage?" He hesitated. Something deeper. Before she could respond, a knock shattered the moment. Evelyn flinched, setting down the lamp. Through the window she saw the silhouette of Sheriff Tom Redden, a broad, kind man with suspicion written in his stance. "Evenin', Evelyn," he called. "Heard you came back from the storm with company." Evelyn opened the door halfway, forcing a smile. "That's right, Sheriff. My husband's resting inside." "Your husband?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny, don't recall you ever mentioning one before." "Wasn't anyone's business," she said coolly. Tom tipped his hat but didn't move. "Well, Army Patrol says an Apache fugitive might have been in these parts. You ain't seen anyone like that, have you?" Evelyn's heart stuttered. "No," she said firmly. "Just my husband and me." Tom studied her for a long moment. His gaze shifted toward the window where the lamplight flickered. Then with a sigh he said, "All right then. You be careful, Evelyn. Folks are talking." "I always am, Sheriff." When the door closed, Evelyn leaned against it, trembling. Katan stepped from the shadows, eyes filled with quiet respect. "You lied again," he murmured. She met his gaze, her pulse steadying, "And I'll keep lying if it means keeping you safe." Katan's lips curved into a slow, almost disbelieving smile. "Then maybe your lie is starting to sound like truth." Outside the town slept. But inside that little house, something fragile and forbidden had already begun to take root. For the next few days, Evelyn's quiet house at the edge of Las Piedras lived under two worlds. One in the open, where the schoolteacher widow went about her ordinary life, and another hidden in shadows, where an Apache man healed in secret. Katan kept mostly to the shed behind her house during the day, repairing her tools, mending the fences, and tending to her horse. He moved silently with a kind of grace that unsettled her, an animal's awareness of every sound and every shift in the wind. At night, when the town grew still and the lanterns were out, he came inside. At first, they spoke only in fragments, small things said across lamplight. But as the night stretched on, those fragments grew into something else. Evelyn poured water into a basin, glancing toward him as he sat sharpening his knife. "You're healing faster than I expected." Katan nodded. "My mother was a healer. She said a wound listens to your thoughts. If you want to live, you do." "That sounds like something from Scripture," she said softly. He gave a faint smile. "You believe in your God? I believe in the wind, the fire, the things that don't lie." She set the basin down and met his gaze. "And people lie?" "All the time," he said simply. Then softer. "Except you." Evelyn felt her heartbeat quicken. "You don't know me well enough to say that." Katan leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. "I know what fear sounds like. You didn't have it when you faced those soldiers. You looked them in the eye." Her throat tightened. "Maybe I was too foolish to be afraid." "No," he said. "You were brave." The silence that followed was warm and uneasy. The way his eyes held hers made her pulse jump, and she turned away quickly, busying herself with her books. But it didn't matter. His presence filled the room, even when he didn't speak. Days passed, and their routine found a rhythm. Evelyn taught children at the small schoolhouse in town, pretending everything was normal while Caton watched from the hills, unseen. He came down only when the sun dipped below the mesa, always waiting until she gave the all-clear signal, a lantern placed on her porch. Each night they ate together. Sometimes they spoke about the world before, the lives they'd both lost. One evening, Evelyn confessed quietly, "My husband died 3 winters ago. Fever took him. He was a kind man, but I never really knew him." Caton listened without interrupting. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I'm just trying to make sense of what's left." He nodded slowly. "The dead leave us their silence. It becomes heavy if we don't fill it with something." Evelyn looked up. "Like what?" "Like truth," he said. The word struck her harder than she expected. Truth. The thing they'd both been avoiding. A few nights later, while she was locking the windows, Caton spoke from the shadows near the hearth. "When I leave here, they will still hunt me." Evelyn froze. "Then you can't leave," he gave a quiet laugh. "You forget I was running before I met you." "I can't stop now." Her chest tightened. "You could start over here. I could say we married in secret, that you're working on one of the ranches." He studied her face carefully. "Why would you do that for me?" She met his gaze, forcing herself not to look away. "Because I believe you didn't kill that rancher. And because—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Because I don't want to see you go." Something shifted between them, something deeper than the night they'd lied to soldiers, deeper than the fear that bound them together. Caton's eyes softened. "You should not care for me, Evelyn Carter. My world doesn't forgive women who love my kind. And my world," she said quietly, "hasn't forgiven me for anything in years." The words hung between them like a secret neither could take back. Outside, the coyotes called in the distance. Inside, the small flame of the lamp burned low, its light trembling against the walls. Caton looked at her one last time before turning away. "Then maybe," he said softly, "we are both ghosts searching for the same fire." Evelyn sat in silence long after he left the room, her hands trembling around the lamp. She knew the truth she was fighting had already found her. This wasn't a lie anymore. It was something far more dangerous. The lie was meant to last one night. But lies, like fire, spread faster than either of them imagined. By the end of the week, the sheriff of Las Piedras was already sniffing around. Evelyn could see it in his narrowed eyes when he stopped by the schoolhouse one morning. His hand resting on his revolver, his questions too casual to be friendly. "Evenin', Mrs. Carter," Sheriff McCready drawled, lingering by the door as the last of the children hurried out. "You seen anything strange these past few days? Any travelers? Maybe someone who didn't belong?" Evelyn forced a smile. "Not that I've noticed. Just been busy with lessons." He tipped his hat, eyes still studying her face. "Funny thing," he said. "A ranch hand from the Stone Creek spread swore he saw an Apache up by your ridge. Tall fella. Said he walked like a soldier." Her pulse quickened, but she kept her voice even. "You know how men talk when they've had too much whiskey." The sheriff smiled thinly. "Maybe, but I'd hate to think you were hiding anyone again." "Mrs. Carter, you remember what happened to that widow up in Santa Mesa? Helped one of his kind, and the whole town burned her house down." Evelyn's heart turned cold. "Good day, Sheriff," she said, closing the door before her trembling hands could give her away. That night, she didn't light the porch lantern. Caton came anyway. He appeared like a shadow slipping through the dark, silent as the wind. "You didn't signal," he said, his voice low. "They know," she whispered. "Someone saw you." "The sheriff came today." Caton's eyes narrowed. "Then I'll go tonight." "No." She stepped closer, desperate now. "You'll never make it. They've been watching the roads. If you go, they'll kill you before sunrise." He studied her face for a long moment, then said quietly, "You would risk yourself for me again?" "I already have," she whispered. The words hung between them like a confession. She'd crossed the line. There was no pretending anymore. Later that night, as they hid in the barn, Caton told her the truth she'd long suspected but never dared to ask. "The rancher they say I killed, his name was Hollis. He murdered my brother." His jaw tightened, eyes dark with memory. "My brother went to trade for horses. Hollis shot him in the back, then said it was self-defense. The army took his word over mine. When I went to face him, they called it an attack. Evelyn swallowed. So you didn't kill him? Caton's gaze met hers. No, but I wanted to. The firelight flickered between them, and she saw for the first time how much pain he carried, how much hate had been forced into him by a world that refused to see him as a man. Evelyn stepped closer, laying a trembling hand on his arm. You've been running ever since? He nodded. Until that night. Until you. The way he said it made her heart ache. She wanted to tell him that he didn't have to run anymore, that somehow they could build something out of this chaos. But the sound of horses cut her thoughts short. Caton's head snapped toward the sound. They're coming. Evelyn's breath caught. The sheriff? More than one, Caton said grimly. And they're not coming to talk. Within moments, the quiet of the desert night shattered. Hoofbeats thundered through the dark, dogs barking in the distance. Evelyn grabbed his arm. There's a trapdoor in the cellar. Go. I won't hide while you face them, he growled. You'll die if you don't. She pleaded. Please, Caton, just this once, listen to me. He hesitated. Then, with a look that said everything words couldn't, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against her forehead. If they hurt you, I'll burn this whole town to the ground. Her voice broke. Go. He disappeared into the darkness below as the first lanterns appeared outside. Evelyn straightened her dress, wiped her tears, and opened the door before the men could break it down. Sheriff McCready stood in front, rifle in hand. Evening, Mrs. Carter. You mind if we look around? Evelyn's heart pounded. Of course, Sheriff. I've nothing to hide. As the men fanned out through her house, the sheriff watched her with that same cold suspicion. Funny thing, ma'am, he said. When a woman lies, it shows in her eyes. Evelyn met his gaze, steady and fearless. Then I suppose you'll see the truth in mine. Beneath her feet, Caton waited in the dark, hearing every word, his hand on his knife, his heart breaking, not because she lied for him, but because he finally understood what that lie had become. It wasn't a game anymore. It was love. Rain began that night like a whisper, then rose into a roar that swallowed the desert whole. The wind tore at the shutters, the thunder cracked across the sky, and Evelyn Carter's house became a trembling cage of secrets. Inside, the sheriff's men searched every room, boots muddy, eyes sharp. Sheriff McCready lingered near the hearth, his rifle resting on one knee, his patience wearing thin. Funny, he said, his voice almost drowned by the storm. A woman living out here alone, no one to talk to, no one to care for. Hard to believe you don't get visitors. Evelyn stood rigid by the window, hands clasped before her. You've searched every room, Sheriff. There's no one here but me. McCready's lips twitched. That so? Maybe we'll look around the barn. Or the cellar. Her pulse stopped cold. The cellar's empty, she said quickly. Too quickly. The sheriff caught it. The tremor in her tone, the flicker of fear that betrayed her. Well now, he said softly. You won't mind if we check. He nodded to one of his deputies. The man moved toward the trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Evelyn's breath came shallow. Beneath that floor, Caton waited in silence, listening to the footsteps above him. One wrong move and this would end in blood. Stop. Evelyn's voice cut through the noise of the storm. McCready turned. What's that? You've no warrant, she said, her voice shaking but loud. You can't search a lady's home on a rumor. McCready smirked. Rumor? There's a dead rancher and an Apache on the run. You call that rumor? I call it injustice, her chin lifted. If you want to drag me through the mud again, Sheriff, you'll have to explain to the church council why you burst into a widow's home in the middle of a storm. The men hesitated. Even McCready paused. Evelyn's defiance, small, trembling but fierce, threw him off balance. He studied her a long moment, then spat on the floor. You always were too proud for your own good, Mrs. Carter. After another long silence, he nodded to his men. Let's go. She's not worth the mess. They turned for the door. Evelyn didn't move until the last set of boots disappeared into the rain. Only then did she sink to her knees, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. When she lifted the trapdoor, Caton climbed out silently. His dark eyes flicked to the door, then to her trembling hands. You risked everything, he said quietly. I had to. Her voice cracked. They would have killed you. He took a slow step closer. And now they'll be back. You know that. I don't care. He stared at her, the lamplight flickering across his face, rain dripping from his hair. Why? Evelyn's voice broke like glass. Because I can't lose you, K10. I can't. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The only sound was the rain hammering against the roof. Then Caton crossed the distance between them and caught her face in his hands. You shouldn't love me, he murmured, his voice raw. It will destroy you. Maybe, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain that ran down his skin. But it's already too late. He kissed her then. Not like a man claiming something forbidden, but like someone surrendering to what he could no longer deny. The storm raged around them, thunder crashing as if the heavens themselves were watching. But love in the West never came without blood. Through the sound of the storm came the faint, distant echo of horses again, 3, maybe 4. Evelyn froze. Caton's body went rigid. They came back, he said grimly. He didn't believe you. Evelyn's eyes widened. What do we do? Caton grabbed his rifle. We run. No, she said desperately, clutching his arm. They'll follow. The river's too high. You'll drown before you reach the canyon. He hesitated, torn between instinct and the truth in her eyes. But before either could speak again, the window shattered, glass flying as a gunshot tore through the night. Evelyn screamed. Caton dropped, pulling her down as another bullet splintered the wall above them. Outside, voices shouted through the storm. He's in there! The Apache's inside! Caton's breath came fast. Stay behind me, he hissed. Evelyn clutched his hand, tears streaking down her face. Caton, please don't kill anyone. They'll never stop hunting you. He looked at her, his eyes fierce and full of something deeper than rage. If they touch you, I won't stop. Lightning split the sky as he rose, rifle in hand, a shadow against the flame-lit room. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one that had just begun inside Evelyn Carter's heart. The storm swallowed everything, the gunfire, the shouting, even Evelyn's sobs. Wind howled through the shattered windows, throwing rain across the walls like streaks of silver fire. Caton moved with the precision of a wolf cornered. Swift, silent, deadly. Stay down, he barked, ducking behind the table as another shot cracked through the room. The bullet splintered the doorframe inches from Evelyn's head. Outside, lanterns bobbed in the darkness. The sheriff's men shouted through the wind. Come out, Carter! We know he's there. Move away from him and maybe we'll let you live. Evelyn pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting the scream rising in her throat. Caton's eyes met hers through the flicker of lightning. They didn't need words now. Both knew if they didn't act soon, the men outside would set fire to the house. He motioned toward the back door. Through the barn, he mouthed. She nodded, heart pounding. They crawled through the wreckage, past overturned chairs, spilled lamp oil, and the steady drip of blood from Caton's arm where a bullet had grazed him. When they burst into the rain-soaked night, the wind tore the breath from her lungs. Thunder rolled across the sky, echoing the chaos behind them. Caton gripped her wrist and ran, pulling her across the flooded yard toward the stable. Inside, the horses snorted nervously, stomping in fear. Evelyn grabbed a saddle while Caton threw open the rear doors. You can't fight them all, she whispered. We have to go north, the river's high, but it's our only chance. Caton nodded, his face grim. Hold tight. They mounted and rode into the storm. The rain came in sheets, stinging their skin, blurring the world into silver and shadow. Behind them, shouts rose again. McCready and his men, lanterns flaring as they gave chase. The chase tore through the valley like a ghost hunt. Hooves thundered through the mud, flashes of lightning revealing glimpses of desperate faces. Evelyn clung to Caton's waist, her skirts soaked, her heart slamming against his back. Faster, she shouted over the wind. Caton's voice was low but steady. I'll get you safe, Evelyn. I swear it. They reached the ridge where the land dropped steeply toward the river. The torrent below glimmered white and wild, a wall of rushing death. Caton reined in, breath ragged. We can't cross now. They're right behind us. Indeed, they could hear them. The echo of McCready's voice carried through the storm.
End of the line, Apache.
Step away from the lady and I might let her live. Caton turned his horse to face them. The lightning lit his face, fierce, defiant, soaked in rain and blood. You'll have to go through me, he called. McCready raised his rifle. Gladly. The shot came before Evelyn could scream. Caton jerked in the saddle, his body twisting with the impact. Evelyn cried out, catching him as he fell. The horse reared, nearly throwing them both. Caton, she sobbed, pulling him to the ground. The rain poured over his face, washing the blood down his neck. He coughed, grimacing in pain. "It's not bad," he lied. She pressed her hands over the wound. "Don't you dare lie to me now," she choked out. "You've lied enough for one lifetime." He gave a faint smile. "Then I'll tell the truth." His voice trembled. "You saved me, Evelyn. No one ever risked their life for me before. Not even my own people." Tears mixed with the rain on her face. "You're not going to die. I won't let you." He reached up, touching her cheek with blood-stained fingers. "If I do, remember this wasn't a lie." "Not anymore." Another shot rang out. The earth exploded near them. Evelyn screamed and shielded his body with hers. McCready's men were closing in. Lanterns swayed as they dismounted, weapons ready. "Step away, Mrs. Carter," the sheriff shouted. "You can't save him." Evelyn rose slowly, hands shaking. "No," she said through her tears. "But I can stop you." She raised Caton's rifle, the same one he'd taught her to shoot with in the quiet of her backyard. Her hands were trembling, her eyes wild with fear, but her aim was steady. "Drop it." "Ma'am," McCready warned. "You come one step closer," she said, "and I swear I'll show you what mercy really looks like." The men hesitated. None of them expected the mild schoolteacher to stand her ground in the rain, rifle raised, her wounded lover behind her. McCready's expression hardened. "You're throwing your life away for a savage." Evelyn's eyes blazed. "No, I'm saving it for a man." The storm surged, the river roared, and lightning struck so close the ground shook beneath their feet. McCready fired, his shot going wide as Caton surged up, tackling him into the mud. The rifle went flying. The two men struggled, mud and blood mixing under the storm's fury. Evelyn screamed his name, but the thunder swallowed it whole. And when the next lightning flash split the sky, one man was still standing. When the storm finally broke, the desert fell silent. The wind stilled, the rain slowed to a whisper, and the first pale light of dawn crept across the horizon. The world looked washed clean, except for the red mud where blood had been spilled. Evelyn knelt beside Caton, her skirts soaked, her hands trembling as she pressed them over his wound. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air. McCready's rifle lay abandoned several feet away, half buried in the mud. The sheriff himself was gone, alive but defeated, his men dragging him away into the gray dawn. "You shouldn't have spared him," Caton murmured weakly. His voice was rough, barely a whisper. "He'll come back." Evelyn brushed the wet hair from his forehead. "Then I'll be ready next time." He gave a faint, broken laugh that turned into a cough. "You're braver than any man I've known." She pressed her palm against his cheek. "You're the only man I've ever truly known." By midday, the rain had stopped completely. The river still raged below, but the sky had cleared to a washed-out blue. Evelyn managed to half-carry, half-drag Caton to the small cave beneath the ridge, a place hidden from the road, where the sun filtered through the stone like a soft fire. She built a small fire and tore strips from her petticoat to bandage his side. Every touch made him wince, but he never once pulled away. His eyes stayed on her, dark and quiet, like the storm had carved something new into them. When she was done, he caught her wrist gently. "You should go back," he said. "They'll be looking for you. If they find us both, I'm not leaving," she cut in. "I've spent years being what everyone told me to be, obedient, polite, silent. The day I lied for you was the first time I felt alive." Caton's gaze softened. "And the day I asked you to pretend was the first time I wished a lie could be true." Tears welled in her eyes. "It is true," she whispered. He looked at her for a long time, then reached up and touched the chain around her neck, a small silver cross, worn and bent. "Your God might not forgive you for this." "Then he doesn't know love as I do," she said. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the steady breath between them, the fire's faint crackle, the sound of their hearts finding each other after all the chaos. Days passed. Caton's strength began to return, though he moved slower, his breath still shallow. Evelyn ventured down to town once, disguised under a shawl. The whispers were everywhere. The Apache got away. The schoolteacher helped him. The sheriff nearly drowned. She didn't care. Let them whisper. Let the town believe what it wanted. She had made her choice. When she returned to the ridge, Caton was waiting at the cave's mouth, watching the sunset turn the desert gold. "They'll keep hunting you," she said quietly. He nodded. "Then I'll keep moving." North, maybe. Toward the mountains. Evelyn's throat tightened. You're leaving? He turned to her, his face calm, though his eyes betrayed him. If I stay, they'll come again. And next time, they'll burn this land to ash. You've already given up enough for me. She shook her head, stepping closer. You think love is something you can walk away from? Caton smiled sadly. No. I think it's something worth protecting, even from myself. She closed the distance between them, her hands trembling as she reached for his. Then let me protect it too. That night, under the starlit silence of the desert, he took her hand and pressed it against his heart. When I first asked you to pretend, he said, I thought I was using you to survive. But somewhere between the lie and the truth, I found what I was running from. What was that? She asked softly. Peace. He kissed her then, slow, reverent, the kind of kiss that spoke of promises neither time nor distance could erase. When dawn came again, he was gone. All that remained was the silver pendant he'd worn around his neck, an Apache talisman carved from bone, left beside her on the blanket. Evelyn held it in her hands and smiled through her tears. The world outside might never understand what had passed between them, but she did. It had begun as a lie, a single night of pretending. And yet, in the end, it became the truest thing either of them had ever known. Weeks later, travelers along the northern trail spoke of a lone Apache seen riding through the canyon passes, wounded, but alive, with a carved token hanging from his neck and a silver cross tied beside it. And in Las Piedras, a widow wore a bone pendant beneath her dress, her eyes always searching the horizon when the wind carried the scent of rain. Because sometimes, love in the West didn't end in marriage or promise. It lived on in the space between storms, where truth was born from a single unforgettable lie.